In the 1980s, scientists across the world celebrated as the end of smallpox was declared. This was the first human disease ever to be eradicated, and many were predicting the end of pandemics altogether. Well, they were wrong. And today we are facing the worst pandemic in over 100 years. In a few short months, COVID-19 has brought the world to a standstill, and we're all bored out of our minds. But we're all staying at home because quarantine and social distancing works. First documented in the Old Testament, quarantine is one of the oldest forms of public health still used today, although it has often been hard to enforce, and voluntary isolation during pandemics is virtually unheard of. Without modern medicine, digital media and mass education, the general reaction to pandemics has been chaos and fear throughout history. But this isn't always the case, and during a particularly grisly pandemic, one Derbyshire village committed a remarkable act of kindness when they sacrificed themselves to save the rest of England. During the summer of 1665, London was at the mercy of the bubonic plague, or Black Death, a disease as scary as it sounds, caused by the bacteria carried by fleas and rats. Victims are seized by a fever, vomiting, swellings, and almost always death. In a few months, the plague had killed off 1/6 of Londoners. But for the small Derbyshire village of Eyam, the chaos of the capital seemed very far away until a local tailor became infected from fleas hidden in a delivery of London cloth. The plague soon swept through the community, killing 77 inhabitants, and by spring the following year, most villagers had had enough and were packing their bags to leave. This was when William Mompesson, the newly appointed village rector, decided to speak up. Knowing that fleeing the village would just spread the disease further, he appealed to the villagers to quarantine themselves in Eyam and save the rest of Derbyshire. He promised that he would stay with them, doing everything in his power to make them as comfortable as possible. Even though this meant almost certain death, the villagers agreed, and a circle of stones was placed around the village, marking out the quarantined area and sealing their fate. Many of the precautions taken during the Eyam quarantine are remarkably similar to modern-day social distancing. Mompesson moved church services outside and had worshippers stand at some distance from each other to avoid unnecessary contact. But it was a hot summer that year, meaning the rat fleas were even more rampant than usual and the plague swept through the village, entire families dying within days of each other. With not one villager breaking quarantine, Eyam's death rate rose to higher than that of London's. Things were bad, and in a letter written just after losing his wife, Mompesson described the smell of death and sadness that hung in the air. Historians estimate that Eyam's 1665 population was somewhere between 350 and 800, but by the autumn of 1666, only 77 remained. But the quarantine was a success and the plague had been contained. It is of no doubt that Mompesson's quick thinking and Eyam's enormous sacrifice had saved the lives of thousands.